Hi, I'm Malcolm Stern, and in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson from Online Events, we're creating a series of podcasts called Slay Your Dragons with Compassion. My book of the same name was conceived and inspired by the suicide of my daughter Melissa and the journey that took me on and the internal resources that I found. All of my guests will have a story to tell around overcoming and ultimately thriving through adversity. Special thanks to the band Stairway, Jim McCarty and Louis Chinamo, for the use of theme music from their album Medicine Dance, and my engineer Owen Santiago. I hope you enjoy this series, and thanks for listening. So welcome to my podcast, Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which I'm doing in conjunction with my friends John and Sandra Wilson at Online Events. And I've had some wonderful guests on, and mostly it's been people who I've been friends with for a long time. And what I've discovered is that everyone has got a story to tell. It's not what I've discovered, it's what I see all the time in therapy groups. And I know today's guest, who's an old and dear friend, Nicholas Janni, has an amazing story, well, lots of amazing stories to tell, but let's see where the dialogue takes us, shall we? So, Nicholas, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Malcolm. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Lovely. And the theme is basically slay your dragons with compassion, which is how do we overcome the adversities that befall us, that we even build on it and become more as a result of it. So that's the theme of the podcast. And you don't have to sort of stray into areas that are not necessarily comfortable, but I know that you're a straight talking man, so let's see how we roll with that. So I think we've known each other for a lot since our kids were tiny, so that's more than 30 years. So yeah, long time. And you were an amazing drummer. I think that's one of the most extraordinary things. Let's start there. I was going to start somewhere else, but I just remembered that you played with Kodo, and it looked like you may become a professional musician.
Mm.
You're certainly a very accomplished musician, but it's not who you are now. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of input about your time, basically on an island, isn't it, with playing with these master musicians.
Sure. Yeah, I often think that if I had another life, I would be a musician and there were times early where I regretted that I was not going to become a professional musician until my other path kind of become my real path became clearer. And actually, Kodo was after I'd already spent 6 months in West Africa learning this drum, the djembe,
Mm,
where I'm kind of semi-professional with that. And that said, there's a huge gap between that and professional.
yeah.
So, on my teens onwards, I knew I could play. I had a decent sense of rhythm. And then the African thing started. I was in Geneva. I was in a theatre company, the only time I was an actor. And we'd come to an end, and someone said, "You have to go and see this African. It's his first time out of Africa, and he's a master." So I went to his concert, and he was playing solo, playing this drum, and it completely blew me away. I mean, I remember he played like faster and faster, and each time he accelerated, he screamed. And I remember it was like he was going up a ladder, and I can remember that literally by the time he'd finished, every cell in my body was open to the point where, because anyway, I was already deep, deep, deep into body work. That made me find out how to contact him, write him, and say, "Can I come and study with you?"
Wow.
And he'd never had a white person with him. And he was the real deal. I didn't realize that even among African masters, he was a very high master. So I went and I lived with him and his family in very primitive conditions, no running water or anything. And he gave me lessons every day. And after a little while, he went to play at marriages or baptisms every day, pretty much every day. And quite soon I became his accompanist. So we would be the only two men, 50 to 100 women. I was obviously the only white person.
Mm.
I had to be a metronome for him. And one there was singing, and one by one women would come in front of him, and he would go into incredible kind of improvisation, and they would go into semi-trance state. Then they go back into the group, and then the next woman would come. So I did that for 5 or 6 months. And when I came back, I practiced a lot. And I did concerts, I made 2 CDs, but mainly I used it in my work. I think you may have experienced that.
I was going to come to that. We had a very
I'm a
interesting.
very potent
Yeah.
agent of helping people really open their body.
Yes, I
And I
remember.
had one, sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on. And in the late 80s, early 90s. And I remember you saying to me after this workshop, you thought you were inviting me along to be the jukebox. And I realized that actually your drum was your magical tool, which would help transform energy. And that sounds a bit sort of woo-woo and new agey, but I actually experienced that something comes through, as you've spoken about with the masters you've studied with,
Yeah.
comes through that. So you've got that as a very lovely parallel to what you're doing now. And I was really impressed that you won the Business Book of the Year award with Leader as Healer.
Right.
And I've both been in groups with you, but I've also been in your groups because I recognized that you had something to teach me. And I think, well, I think definitely the most powerful moment I ever had in my attending workshops was in a workshop with you where we went into intergenerational trauma. And for the first time, I accessed my grief about my daughter's death, truly accessed it so that the tears were flowing. And it was
Mm.
because you created a space that was, there is something about space holding that is quite extraordinary. And you do that. And the beauty is that you do that in the corporate world at a pretty high level.
Mm.
And you're also able to straddle the sort of personal development world. So you've got a broad task, and it would be very easy to sort of go, well, leader as healer, what's that all about? But actually, it's all about the fact that you have experienced this and are bringing it through. So
Mm.
perhaps you could say a little bit about that book and what that meant to you.
Well, let's touch a bit about the intergenerational
Oh
trauma
yes, glad to.
and how I've because my father was Jewish and Italian and lived in a very well-to-do family in Milan. And as the Second World War approached, they were starting to really hit the Jews hard. And his father agreed to an operation. This was my father's story. His father agreed to an operation that he knew would kill him. So it was a kind of way out.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then one day, my father and his mother were told in 2 hours' time, they're going to take your passports. You need to leave. So I get very moved even thinking.
Mm.
So they fled. And, he eventually ended up in England and married my mother, who was not Jewish, and became a world famous film producer.
It was, in fact, because we were at an evening that I put on with Terence Stamp,
Yeah,
uh,
that's right.
and
Yeah,
your dad had produced Far from the Madding Crowd,
exactly. Yeah.
Guilty to Start
And,
With.
and many others. Yeah. However, he had completely buried his trauma. And while he was alive, we had a very fractious relationship. He buried his Jewishness. And particularly after I was 16 and I had a big spiritual awakening, I mean, he really tried to destroy it. It was
Wow.
very threatening to him. So we had basically a terrible relationship. And then he died. Um, and what happened for me was the real breakthrough was one day I was walking in Milan with my wife, who who's Israeli, by which time I'd really begun to open to the whole Jewish topic. And we were walking in Milan, and it's an extraordinary, magnificent city. And it suddenly hit me. what he'd been through.
Mm.
And I just started crying my heart out for him.
That's so beautiful, Nicholas.
And that,
I'm really touched hearing that.
me too. And that really changed everything in my whole connection with him. Also because, I mean, there was a whole other topic of him being so famous, classic thing of a son feeling much less than, and so on. All of that kind of healed to a large degree. And after that moment in Milan, I just started having a huge heart open to him and really proud of him and fascinated by his journey. And ever since then, I also felt him very with me in a way. You know, like I live in Puglia now, and we have an amazing olive grove. And I used to, well, it was very significant for me to start living here in relation to him. And I actually, it's getting very emotional again. After we settled in the house, I used to occasionally walk into the olive grove and speak to him and actually say out loud, Father, I'm bringing you home.
Oh, that's
Because he was in exile in every way and he loved Italy. He never came back to Italy.
mm,
So, you know, it's been a huge story. And then, of course, I trained with Thomas Hubel and really learned how to work with trauma, personal and intergenerational. So it's become a big part of my work, also with corporate leaders. You know, I worked with two African American chief executives, very, very successful people. And I mean, I also learned a lot through working with them as we uncovered those layers until we really hit in the body the point of how slavery was sitting in their system and the agony of that. And it was an extraordinary process. One of them had never considered that he might be affected by that.
wow. Yeah, so it's funny because I've heard you talk about your dad before, but never at this level and this
Mm.
depth. And what I'm really hearing is that you found something that most people don't find. I think when there's a sort of sense that our parents haven't done the right thing by us, whatever we think that ought to be, it's a place that shuts down and lives in resentment.
Absolutely. Which is
And
how I was when he was
you were,
alive. Yeah,
yes. But it's beautiful that you experienced it, and then also that you're honoring him to this day, and that
totally.
you have taken up residence in his native land, which I think was pretty
Yeah.
extraordinary as well for you.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I think you've talked about intergenerational trauma, and of course, you introduced me to Thomas Hubel as well, and I also did some work with him,
Mm.
and his work was profound around intergenerational trauma, and perhaps you could tell us a bit more what that actually means.
What it means, or what I came to understand viscerally through Thomas, um, is that almost every culture it's like we're walking in waist deep water, but we walk as if we're dry. And that waist deep water is all the imprints of what the group, the tribe, the culture has been through in every way. Um, and got closed down because it could not be felt. You know, for instance, that most people who were in the camps, the Holocaust camps, just went mute.
Yeah.
So the whole thing got frozen, but it got passed down. I mean, that's the most obvious example, second, third generation Holocaust family members who are walking around in terror. Well, they weren't in the camps.
Yes.
Or African Americans who are walking around with a profound sense of, I can't sit at this table. I'm not, it's not right for me to sit at that table or whatever. Or in the case of the other client, her grandmother would never sit with her back to the door of a restaurant. You know, so we realized in her that she is carrying a fundamental level of terror. So, and we know from lots of research as well that I mean, psychologists have known this a long time, but It's becoming clear through research as well that trauma is passed down through the generations. There's a beautiful picture in my book of a man carrying a suitcase in the dark, kind of, and you see his back, and the words are hurts are passed down through the generations
Mm.
until someone is ready to feel them. And
That's,
that
that's
says it perfectly.
It does. And funnily enough, that also, I'm not a Bible basher, but there's a wonderful line in the Bible: the sins of the parents are visited on the children, generation after generation, until I can't remember the bit of it, but it's
Yeah,
basically until
it's
they take
that.
action and
Yeah.
change it. So we've got quite a profound truth there, haven't we? That
Yes,
if people can get through their trauma, they can stop. It's almost like carrying this luggage around,
exactly.
carrying it around. And so that's been your work. And I know that was your work in the personal development field. We both taught at Finton together and places like that. But what I'm fascinated by is how you've managed to straddle the divide and to create. And I've met some of your clients, and I know that you are held in really high esteem, and you do things that are going to be off the wall for some people.
Mm.
I'm not saying they're off the wall at all. I'm just saying they could be perceived as being a bit, lightweight. They're certainly not that.
No. Well,
So you,
um, first of all, people are people. So if you're working, I don't care who I'm working with, the CEO of 300,000 people is a human being, and he or she is carrying exactly the same
yes.
inner architecture as anyone else. So I have, once you understand that, then it was more about me gaining the confidence, which it took quite a long time and is ever evolving. Um, but I'm also, as the book is evidence of, I can explain things very coherently. So first of all, I can make a very strong and very simple case for why we need to look at all the emotions we've frozen. If we want to be in high performance, for instance. I mean, it's very simple, and it
Mm.
actually gets simpler and simpler. So, um, and also that's only one pillar of my work, because my work has two pillars: awakening and healing. And I can explain it all very persuasively. And once there's enough cognitive agreement, then we get into the experiential work.
Right.
And
So
that's
that's
where we
good.
see
Yeah.
where real change happens. And we do deep somatic work. And the biggest obstacle often in that particular part of the journey is the emotional. For good reason. People are I work with people who haven't cried for years.
Yes.
It's safe enough where actually tears can flow. And it's all about safety and permission.
Mm.
There's no judging. If someone hasn't cried for years, they're not bad. It's because they've never been held. So I
Funny.
had to go through a whole
Yes.
well of absolutely getting rid of any kind of judgment or. And what I noticed the more I work, and also, as you know, as we both hold, as the kind of people who do deep work, we have to be constantly doing our work.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I'm doing that, my own healing work and awakening more than ever, actually.
Mm.
And I'm finding in the work I'm doing, which is mainly in the corporate world, I'm both fiercer and more loving than ever. And it's a winning combination.
Yes.
I no longer have any fear of what people think of me. So I will say things exactly as they are, but with a lot of love.
Yes. I think that's a very interesting combination. And Joanna Macy has just died. I don't know if
I
you know.
know, I followed that. Yeah.
And she said that she spoke about the path of the lover and the warrior living together.
Mm,
She embodied that, and
that's
some
it.
ways I'm seeing
That's absolutely it. Yeah.
yes,
So
yes,
you can put me in any boardroom and I will have no fear and I will get through to most of the people. And of course, there'll be some people who just have a no. Okay. It's too much. Too
yes,
much. But that was the same, I brought a very radical approach to theatre to England, and I taught acting for 20 years, including at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And a lot of the students there were like, wow, this is incredible, because it was so strong and so embodied. And there were others who like, no way. Okay.
Fair enough. They're
And
not.
that's how it is. Not everyone, I mean, doing real development is a choice.
Yes. Well, I've watched your progress over the years, and I can actually see that you hold a space where anything can happen
Yeah.
without you losing your center. And I think that's the skill we have as group leaders.
Mm.
Anything can be in the room. People know it, and then you can go deeper.
Yes.
You've also said something very important as well about that if you win people over at a cognitive level, there's then more space for you to do the deep emotional work because they're
Exactly.
on board, they understand you.
Yeah. And it's not, of course, we should say as well, when I'm speaking to a group cognitively, there is a whole transmission going on that's way beyond the cognitive as
Yeah.
well, as well.
So this is something you've stepped into a lot, and your book has probably blasted you into this realm in a bigger way. I don't know
Mm.
what impact that's had, and what inspired you to write Leader as Healer.
Yeah, before Leader as Healer, I called my work presence, core presence, authentic presence. And I think probably around 2000, 2001, I don't remember exactly, somehow that those words dropped in, Leader as Healer. Um, and I started to kind of talk about it a bit with people. I even spoke the words to a couple of CEO clients, wondering what they would think. And they got I got a very positive response. And was talking about it more and more. And eventually, a colleague of mine, who's a very well known consultant and a huge supporter of mine, said, you really need to write a book on this. So I'm not a natural writer, and it was quite a long drawn out process. But I wrote the book. And then my publisher put it up for the Business Book Awards. And to my astonishment, I knew I was a finalist in the leadership category. There were 14 categories. So we went to this black tie dinner thinking, we're just going to a party basically. And come the leadership category, I thought, I didn't expect anything.
Mm.
But I won that category, which was already beyond any expectation. They're all business categories, obviously. And at the end of the evening, the head judge said, it's been my task to read all 14 winners and choose the book of the year. And I'm going to get emotional in a
Oh
different.
my.
And she started talking about the book she'd chosen. And I was like, no. And then she said, this is the book everyone should be reading.
Wow.
The business book of the year is Leader as Healer. So it was a very momentous moment professionally, and it has made a huge difference
Yes.
in many, many ways. Internally as well. I mean, when I give speeches, I never have any notes. I never did. But now it's just like I open a chapter of the book, and not that I repeat, but it's kind of organized things
Mm.
internally.
No, I get that.
It's also given me obviously a new level of credibility and respect. And it's talked about regularly on LinkedIn, or I meet people and they out of the blue, they say, I have your book by my bedside. Best of all, recently, another CEO man I know was flying business class BA to India. And he had my book on the table. And the head of the cabin crew came by and said, oh my goodness, that's my favorite book.
Wow, isn't that lovely?
What an amazing story, So it's had more impact than I could have possibly imagined,
Yes.
which is lovely. And when I look at it now, which I do occasionally, first of all, the publisher did a beautiful job with the photos. And when I read the text, I'm like, yeah, this is good, which is not always the case when you read what you've written. So,
Yeah, I think sometimes we get inspired. I mean, the first two books I wrote took me 4 years to write, and Slay Your Dragons with Compassion, which was inspired by my daughter's
yeah.
suicide, took me 7 months.
Yeah, it's a
I
beautiful
was
book.
I was just
Exactly.
downloading everything I needed to download.
Yeah. Well, I just submitted a new book to the publisher.
Oh yes, you mentioned that to me.
Yeah, co-authored with Amy Fox, who you know, who's a dear friend. And it's a collection of shortish pieces by both of us, which took us a month to get together, or a little bit over a month. And we're very excited by it. It's really strong for the leadership world as well. Very strong, uncompromising writing. So it's lovely because I wasn't up for going through torture of writing a whole new book.
No, I tried a few times after my book, and I just thought I can't do this.
No,
I've just
it
I've
was 2 years to write Leader as Healer, you know. So
That's pretty good. So you have your legacy book there as
yeah,
much what you've been teaching. And what's your trajectory going forward? What do you see yourself carrying on, or are you just carrying on with what you're doing? But how do you
it's a
see it
good
evolving?
question. Um, so one of my highest offerings I see is that I run transformational coaching programs for people who work with senior leaders.
Mm.
And it's a 6 month online program. And the first cohort, some of them are now continuing at a second level with me. And it's really transforms their work. I mean, radically transforms their work because they're used to working at a high cognitive level. And I'm coming from, no, 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 no. I'm going to show you how you can feel the entire interior of your client. It's amazing the effect that it's having on their work. So I understand I will keep doing that. I have a, I have a vision of creating also a kind of quite exclusive program for very high level CEOs that would be a year-long program or some co-led with people like Amy and other people. And then also beginning to think about a few people I might train very intensively who will carry on my work. Other than that, to keep looking for organizations who really want to engage. It's quite difficult with some of the bigger organizations because they want to and then they don't. It's too much.
Well, I guess they get threatened, don't they, a bit by some of
They
the.
get very threatened, even though
Well,
they understand the value of the work.
I'm just wondering whether part of that threat would be you'd be working intensely with one of their key people who would then realize that he was in a container that didn't fit him any longer. Well,
Yeah, that happens a bit, but not as much as you might think,
right.
actually. Most people get
Yeah.
inspired to try and change where they work. Yeah.
So you travel over quite a lot of the world doing what you do,
Hmm.
and how is that for you? Sort of like getting out into different cultures and sort of managing people with because they're going to have different mindsets as well. That's what I found, for example, when I was working in China.
Hmm.
It was almost like I had to find a different language to be able to work with them.
Hmm. Yeah, I did used to travel a lot doing the work, and generally speaking, I quite soon discovered that the kind of level of work that I was bringing was genuinely universal. So although there are, of course, cultural differences, there is something that's way beyond culture and just human.
Yeah.
It's like if you look at all the mystical traditions, they kind of speak with one voice about the core journey of awakening. Um, and also, really now where I meet what you're saying is when I teach at the IMD Business School, which is one of the world's top business schools. And I typically have a group of about 40 senior leaders. And I'll have Japanese and a lot of Saudis and Europeans and occasionally Americans. So there I have really a multicultural group. And there I find the kind of point of language that I also used to find when I was traveling, that if I was in India, someone would come up to me and say, "Do you know you're teaching the Vedanta?" And when I was working a lot corporately in Israel, people would say, "You know you're teaching Kabbalah." So that proves my point in a way,
Yes.
that there is something universal. There really is in the human journey, I believe. I see, I more than believe.
More than believe you know it, because
I see
what
it.
I see is very much the work that you're doing and that I'm doing and that a lot of our friends are doing.
Mm,
Very much alchemical work. It's bringing through some,
exactly.
it almost feels like mysticism, but it isn't. It's just allowing another layer to come through and to be fed by
Yes.
Nestle. And they say four keys to running a group: show up, be present, trust the process, and get out of the way.
Right.
And
Yeah. And I see now in the work that it is going deeper and deeper. And it's going because from a very, very young age and the exposure I had to different teachings, I always knew the body was right at the core.
mm,
And in a way, what I'm doing now is going deeper than ever in in the body and even the subtle body. And I've begun to see or think of some of the work is actually a recoding. It feels sometimes like someone's whole system on a way beyond cognitive level is starting to recode. And I feel it in myself sometimes as well, which means that the whole experience of reality starts to shift. And there's no way you would ever think yourself into that or even predict that before it's happening because it's always new. But the whole notion of recoding, that's why at Matrix we call our podcast Recoding the Future. I think it's very profound.
it is. You just made me think about. I've got a woman who's she's a professor and a doctor in one of my groups, and she's self-proclaimed autistic, and she certainly exhibits those behaviors. And
Yes.
what she explained to the group was that they're wired differently. Now,
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have the capacity to help rewire people's mindsets.
I think it's very close. And I don't think it's about rewiring their mindsets. I think it's about rewiring their whole nervous system at quite a surprising level.
Yes.
I don't, yeah, I personally don't really work much with mindsets. I mean,
No, no, I get that.
I address them if they're there
Yes.
because actually most people's mindset, I think we have an incredibly distorted version of reality most of the time, if we're talking about mindsets.
Yes.
And most of those mindsets come from disconnection. I mean, my whole work is about, I sometimes say to groups, we took the USB out of our body, our emotions, our intuition, transcendent stillness. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the USB back in. And it's a good metaphor.
It's a good metaphor, and one that, again, if it's understood, then you're not going to be seen as doing something weird.
It's difficult to argue with that.
Yes.
People understand. I say to a corporate group, do you know you remember how it feels when your body is really alive and open? You know how that feels. Yeah, yeah, we know that. So what percentage of each day do you have that?
Mm.
It's somewhere between 5 and 10%. So then my next comment is, well, but do you understand what we've normalized? That we have normalized living in a very small version of reality.
It's really interesting because it's, I think, I've often had little insights into the fact that I am not just this lump of flesh and bones, but it's almost like it feels like sand slipping through my fingers when I try and nail that and get more in
Mhm.
touch with the transcendent part.
No, that's very core for me.
Yeah, I hear that.
Like in the Jewish mystical tradition, they have this beautiful metaphor of you open the page of a book and you have all the black letters and there's a white page. So for me, the access to the white page, which anyway is infinite, is quite regular. And it's always kind of there if I shift my attention. And that's part of my teaching as well, because if we're basically only living in the black letters, and
So,
even the body, Malcolm, it's
um,
things that are so obvious. Like, okay, so you live less than 10% of your time really with an awake body. When do you have your best ideas? Oh, when I'm exercising. So
yes, it's there.
come on,
Yeah.
it's all there.
But I guess also it's threatening. I remember I was running a group once with there was a quite high-powered CEO. This was a personal development group, and his wife had brought him along, and he really got into it and started crying. And he was
Mm.
applauded by the other members of the group for letting his vulnerability be shown. And his wife said, if he did this in the boardroom, he's dead. And that's we're looking probably 25, 30 years ago. But I'm wondering how true that is now. That
No, it's
page showing
well,
emotion.
in some boardrooms it would be true, but there is a shift happening.
Yes.
There is. I mean, I know in my clients, and I hear from my senior coaches of people they're working with, it's getting less and less easy for senior leaders, when asked how you are, to just say, I'm fine. Really.
Yeah.
And you're hearing much more, I'm struggling, I'm lonely.
Wow.
And also, I did a business podcast last week, and the presenter started with the words, "We are in a time of radical uncertainty." Okay, do we all agree? How can anyone
Do not
disagree
agree.
with that?
Yes.
So let's look at what this means. And one of my starting points in corporate is always Einstein's question: is your mind your master or your servant? Because in 95% of people, it's the master. So if you're trying to navigate radical uncertainty with an operating system in which your mind is your master, you're you're not going to even progress one
Yeah.
inch. Now, I'm also realizing more and more that because of my time in the theater, in the artistic world, radical uncertainty is the foundation. I mean, I used to teach actors to stop trying to know what was going to happen the next second. So the core of the creative process is radical uncertainty.
Yeah.
I live very comfortably with radical uncertainty. I always have. In a group, holding a group, let's see what's emerging.
Yes. I'm just wondering whether you ever, because I know that what I experience a lot is a very positive projection from the people I'm working with, and I get flattered and honored and blah blah blah. And then once in a while, the whole thing twists, and you have someone who really wants to break you for daring to step into that territory. I wonder whether that's true in the environments you work in also.
With groups that I'm, like I have a core group, I have people who train with me at different levels. And I'm generally known as a leader who, in those groups, is not afraid to show my vulnerability
As you've done here
and
in this
and
podcast.
get hugely respected for it.
Right. I'm
So
glad.
I'm wary of that projection.
Yes.
A huge topic. It's a huge topic. But also, I think we have to understand that when we lead a group, we're going into a function. And that function has energetic, even metaphysical contours. Like Thomas used to say, you're getting a loan of energy. So I think we also have to be super clear when we step out of that function, we're coming back to all our humanity and our vulnerability. And I think if we're not clear about that, we're on tricky ground. It took me ages because it's very tempting to be, well, why can't I be this brilliant all the time? No, that's not the full humanity of who I am.
No. Well, I'm in great respect for the work you do, and I think you're reaching the parts that people like me can't reach in the output we have. Because my work is much, I do some corporate work, but mainly I'm in the personal
Mm,
psychotherapy field. But I think what I'm hearing is the optimism that there is a sea change out there as well, and that some people are open, even though they have sort of, positions where they feel they've got to protect themselves from being too visible in their sort of anxiety or fear. And actually, what I'm hearing is that you create a safe place for that to
mm,
emerge also.
mm,
So we're coming towards the end of our podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned things I haven't heard before from you as well, and I loved particularly how you were around your dad. I think that's a wonderful story there of his suffering, your resentment at how he was, then the understanding of his suffering and the forgiveness and the let go, which is a lovely little journey all of its own as well.
mm.
So thank you for bringing some of that
Thank
more
you.
vulnerable stuff here. And the question I always ask at the end of the podcast is, what's the particular dragon you've had to slay? What obstacle have you had to overcome in order to be who you are?
The feeling of being worthless,
Uh, and again, that
but
touches.
not good enough.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that was installed in me in my family ecosystem.
So presumably that's you've transcended that. You've gone past that.
Not 100%.
Yeah.
It's a dragon that still can, I can notice it. I
How?
think it'll be a lot. I think we all have core dragons, to use your terminology.
Yes.
We'll
Yes.
just work with them at deeper and deeper layers.
That's lovely, and I really appreciate that because a lot of people feel that worthlessness, and
Mm.
it's almost considered not okay to talk about it.
Well,
Some
yeah,
circles, in some circles.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, well, it's very lovely to see you, and thank you so much
Yeah,
for coming
thank
on.
you, Malcolm. Really love our
Great,
contact. Thank you and our
lovely.
connection.
We'll speak soon. Thanks very much, Nicholas.